All right, everybody. We're going to watch Garyseconomics explain to us what is money. And Robert has Seyfedin's Principles of Economics and Mises, the theory of money and credit.
Yeah. And if Gary does a good job here, then I guess I'm out of business. So I'm looking forward to see what he has to say.
I watched 10 minutes of this the other night in preparation for this. I had to stop. So first off, I got to apologize to the audience here and to you for pulling us through this. But let's see what this guy has to say. I feel like we should probably talk about this because this individual is getting an enormous amount of attention with his Marxist, Keynesian, pseudoscience, mumbo jumbo garbage.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
We're going to do one called What is Money? And we're going to explain the concept of money so that people can understand it. There are a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings about money. We need to clear them up because if you want to understand the current cost of living crisis and also the massive increase in inequality over COVID, you need to understand what money is. So this is going to be super important for the viewer to understand. Very number one thing people need to understand, money is not real resources. So lots of very wealthy people don't actually have huge amounts of money. They have largely real resources. Money is a separate thing. We're going to explain that. Now, one of the reasons why money is confusing is there are actually a couple of different
We'll just give him that one. Like when it says, okay, money does not equal natural resources. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Word.
Ideas around what money is bouncing around. And the best way to explain that is, I think, to go through an example. So let's imagine I've got £1,000 and you've got nothing. Then I lend you for a week my £1,000. How much money do you have then? It's an interesting question, right? Because on the one hand, you've got £1,000 in your pocket that I just gave you. But on the other hand, you have a debt of £1,000 to me, right? So you literally physically have £1,000, but as an individual, when you consider how much money you have, you should also consider your debts, right?
That's incorrect. So accounting has an equation. I've already mentioned it earlier. I will mention it again. Assets equals liabilities plus equity. This is the balance sheet of a business. Mm-hmm. Okay. So if he, as he said, initially has £1,000, mm-hmm. And let's use, well, it's fine, pounds, but we'll get into the distinction between currency and money, I'm sure, at some point. Okay, his balance sheet would say he has £1,000, and on the equity side of the balance sheet, assuming he has no liabilities, would be his owner's equity. So he, if it's a solely owned business, he would own all of that £1,000, right?
Got it.
Now, when he lends it to the guy across the table, the guy who started out with no balance sheet or a balance sheet with zeros on it, now receives a £1,000 loan from Gary. Yeah. So that's a liability. He owes that money back to Larry. But on the asset side, he's got £1,000 of currency. So he still has a net worth of zero.
Right.
Because his assets are totally wiped out by his liabilities.
Yep.
Basically. Whereas Gary, on the other side, now has asset loan to dude.
Yep.
Right? And he has full equity in that loan, which is still an asset to Larry. Because Larry, what's his name? Gary.
He is a Larry.
So money does not equal net worth. Yeah. He's already conflating the two terms. He's saying, oh, it's an interesting question. If I loan you £1,000, how much money do you have? It's like, well, in one sense you have £1,000. In another sense, you don't have anything because you need to contemplate your liabilities. No, that's what the accounting equation in the balance sheet is. It contemplates your net worth. So you had £1,000. This is why I wanted to go with gold originally, because currency gets a little bit muddier. Mm-hmm. If I have £1,000 of gold and I loan it to someone else, I now have no gold.
You're right.
All I have is a promise that this person will pay me money in the future. Right? And assuming they pay me back with interest, that's the point I would retire the loan and recognize the interest revenue on the loan. If you paid me back at 5% or whatever it was. So whereas the other person has what I described earlier. So already he's conflating the terms money with net worth, which is incorrect.
So if we consider also your debts, you don't have any money. You've got £1,000 and £1,000 of debt. But
He does have money. Again, the guy has £1,000, but he also owes someone £1,000. So he has money, but his net worth is zero because his assets equals his liabilities, which is another way of saying he has no equity in his own business.
Yep, makes sense.
just consider how much cash you have on hand. You have £1,000. The next question is, how much money do I have? So I've given you all my money, my £1,000. So you could say I don't have any money, but you owe me £1,000 and I'm going to get it in a week. So if we consider all of my money, including money owed to me, I've got £1,000.
That's not money. Okay. Money promised to you in the future is not money. That is credit. That's a promise. That's what debt is, like promise to pay money in the future.
Yep.
It's debt if you are the person making the promise, and if you're the person receiving the promise, then it's credit, basically. It's a note receivable to you.
Yeah. Okay.
But it is not money, right?
Yeah.
If I give you a Bitcoin and you say you're going to pay me back next week, okay, do I have the Bitcoin? No.
Right.
You have the Bitcoin until you pay it back to me. All I have is a promise that you will pay me back a Bitcoin in the future.
Yes.
That's it. So he's conflating terms still.
Now, most economists, if they looked at that situation, would say that once I've lent you £1,000, we both have £1,000. That's
Wrong.
interesting, right? So once the loan is made, the amount of money is doubled, okay? And I think this captures the complication we have with understanding what is money. Because some people would say, if you have money but you also have debt, then you don't have money. Some people would say, well, if you have the money, it doesn't matter whether you have debt or not. Some people would say, well, if you've lent the money out, you don't have money. And some people would say, well, if you have money owed to you, you have money. Basically, do I need to have that cash in my pocket for it to be money? Do I need to have no debt for it to be money? If I have somebody owing me money tomorrow, do I have money? And the reason this is complicated is most people's money is cash in the bank, right? But actually, when your money is in the bank account, the bank doesn't actually have that money in many cases. That's money that they owe to you. So there's a complication here about whether...
I have to pull this up. I hope I can say it correctly. But yes, when people say, I have money in the bank, this is very important to the Bitcoin rabbit hole, right? It's not money. It's not yours. And it's not in the bank. Right? It's currency. You don't actually own it. You've loaned it now to the bank. So they have the currency. You don't. You have a promise to receive currency from the bank in the future.
Well, they've loaned it out.
Well,
So it's not even
and the
there.
last part is that it's not in the bank because they re-lend it.
Yeah.
So these things that are called demand deposits, right? You open online banking, there's $100,000 there. You think, oh, I've got $100,000 in the bank. No, you don't. Read the fine print.
Yeah.
You are a creditor to the bank. You have loaned them currency that they then re-lend to other parties, and they have promised to pay you back the digits that are on that screen. That's the actual factual, legal, commercial relationship between you and the bank. And now that we still need to get a layer deeper because the currency itself is basically corrupt.
Yeah.
But I'm sure we'll get into that.
include debt and whether we should include money that is owed to you. And I'm going to argue that yes, we should include debt, and yes, we should include money that is owed to you. And in a way, we have to include money that is owed to you because any money you have in the bank account is money that is owed to you. So essentially, everything that ordinary people think of as money, with the exception of cash, is money that is owed to you. So
Wrong. What is gold? What is gold?
It's a bearer instrument. It's yours.
If you hold
have
physical gold in your possession, well, it's neither owed to you. What was his other point? It was either owed to you, or what did he say?
Go back.
Let's hear it again.
to you. And I'm going to argue that yes, we should include debt, and yes, we should include money that is owed to you. And in a way, we have to include money that is owed to you because any money you have in the bank account is money that is owed to you. So essentially, everything that ordinary people think of as money, with the exception of cash, is money that is owed to you.
Okay, cash in the real sense of the word, which I'm sure he's not using. He's using cash to refer to paper currency, fiat currency. Cash comes from the French word caisse, which means money box. And when cash settlement was executed, it meant the physical settlement of metal for instruments.
Yes.
So you were paying in cash, which means you were paying in bearer asset commodity money, typically gold.
Yeah, I just learned that the other day when we were watching Sailor. I didn't know
Exactly.
that.
So cash in that sense is correct. That is money in your physical possession that is not owed to you by anyone. Again, back to the accounting equation, it's 100% asset and 100% equity. There's no associated liability.
Right.
Now, the problem with fiat currency is that liability that's
Yes.
undisclosed and always it's intrinsic to the note itself, and the
Or
liability
inherent.
intrinsic, it is built into it. You cannot discharge it, right?
Yeah.
So when I take all my cash, my physical currency out of the bank, and I put it under my mattress, and I think now I'm safe from the bankers and I'm safe from the central bankers. Wrong.
Yeah.
They can still counterfeit the currency. They can still steal your purchasing power. They can still hyperinflate the currency. They can still deauthorize the currency. The Bank of
Really?
India turned off the 500 rupee banknote overnight once.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. So there's a liability built into these banknotes.
Yeah.
And again, even if it was a gold-backed banknote that is redeemable for gold, there's still a liability. The paper is the liability. It's the promise that someone's going to give you gold in the future.
Right. And
Fiat currency is weird because it's a promise to nothing.
Right.
It's this perpetually broken promise that's broken through inflation, basically, that people are passing around.
Yeah.
Using it as money, even though it's basically just a fraudulent currency.
Yes. Ugh.
So these are the fundamental problems in understanding it, okay? And we're going to run through it all so that everybody can understand really clearly what is what, okay? So the first thing I'm going to say is, as an individual, when I ask you the question of how much money do you have, you should consider all your cash. Most people don't actually keep that much cash. Any money you have in the bank, any money that you have owed to you, and also any debts that you have.
Again, wrong. Look at the balance sheet of any business in the world. No business reports all of the debts owed to them as cash or money. You are so fucking wrong. Ding.
Ding.
That is your total situation with regards to money. It doesn't really make sense if you...
I'm sorry, I did not mean to use the F word. But like,
We're
seriously,
working on it.
Accounts payable, notes payable. I'm sorry, on the balance sheet side, when they're owed to you, they're receivable, right? So it's accounts receivable or an asset, notes receivable or an asset. These are all promises from vendors or other borrowers that they will pay you back in the future that you're booking on your balance sheet as an asset, but it is separate from cash and cash equivalents, which are things like Bitcoin and currency, basically. So the fact that he's saying that these are all commingled as money is just like, did you ever take accounting 101?
It's
the first thing you talk about in accounting. Like, here's the balance sheet. Here are the first two items.
Yeah.
Did you not make it that far in accounting, bro? What's going on?
I don't know where this guy came from, but it's a bunch of just confusing jargon.
Malarkey.
Malarkey.
borrow £1 million and you have to pay that back in a year to say I'm a millionaire now. You have to include your debts. Makes sense, right? So as an individual, you should include everything. So then why is it that economists don't do that? In order to understand that, I think we need to rewind a bit and go back to the understanding of how money is created. Because this is another story around which there's some confusion. So for example, there are a lot of people who would say to you, when a bank lends you money, they don't actually give you that money, they just create the money out of thin air. And I think that's quite misleading. And I will explain why. The only people who are allowed to print cash and create money out of thin air are the central banks.
He's also wrong about this. Commercial banks can just loan you money, right? Literally against their own equity. So the shareholder equity that's inside of a bank, when they extend a loan to someone, they can just create new units of currency in that user's account.
Yes.
Now, if that user defaults on that loan, then that will decrement the equity of the shareholders in the bank.
Okay,
But they
makes sense.
are creating it sort of out of thin air. Now, there is a claim against the equity in the bank, but the bank is often backstopped by the central bank. If enough banks go bust at once, well, they just go to the central bank who does print the money out of thin air and backstops their equity.
Yeah, okay.
That's what a bank bailout is, basically.
Right.
So in this country, the Bank of England. In the US, it's the Federal Reserve. In Europe, it's the European Central Bank, the ECB, okay? These guys literally can create money. Nobody else can.
And just to be clear, not even the central bank can. We always say money printing. It's a colloquial term because it's what people understand. They think currency equals money, and it's harder to disentangle without going through the whole exploration. But to be very specific, the central bank is not creating any money at all. The central bank holds real money, which is gold in reserve, and it creates currency. It's counterfeiting currency into circulation.
It's a gold derivative. Or is that
well,
not
it
right?
originally was a gold derivative when it could be exchanged for gold, right?
Okay, right.
It was a banknote that was redeemable for gold.
Yeah.
But then we go into fractional reserve banking where they issue more paper notes, banknotes, than they actually have gold reserves. And then eventually when that fraud gets exposed, as it did in the United States in 1971, you know, we had 6 times more US dollars in circulation globally than we had gold reserves as a nation.
Yes.
That's why Nixon suspended gold redeemability, because the fraud was exposed. We had a 6-to-1 leverage ratio, which means we're running a fractional reserve to the tune of 84%. Enough people asked for their gold back at once. Nixon said, no more. We're going to the 0% reserve.
Temporarily suspended.
Temporarily suspended 54 years ago. And that's what gets you on the 0% reserve fiat currency standard. So central banks aren't technically, and I use this term too, I use printing money because it's just, I don't know, the most accessible. But the very tight phrase I've used that's become popular about this in the past, inflation is legal counterfeiting. Counterfeiting is criminal inflation. They are the exact same activity. There is zero economic distinction between the two. There's only an immoral and unethical legal distinction. That one group of people are allowed to counterfeit currency and profit.
Counterfeiting cartel.
It's a currency counterfeiting cartel. Yes. And if you want a deeper dive on that, read the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. But I will continue to use money printing throughout almost as by force of habit, which when I say money printing, I do mean currency counterfeiting under the paradigm of a central bank. So to be very specific, he's saying that, oh yeah, only central banks can create money, but I want to get specific about that distinction, that gold is money. It is that thing that is all asset, no associated liability, mere possession of it is the equity holding in it. Currency is the debt instrument that is a promise to receive money in the future. But we've gone on into this world where currency is no longer redeemable for real money. Therefore, it is the confidence game called fiat currency.
Oh my goodness, thank God for Bitcoin.
Thank God for Bitcoin.
We'll get later to why people think that commercial banks can. But central banks are not allowed to give money out. So then if they're the only guys who can create money.
Also not true. The Federal Reserve Act does prohibit that central banks directly issue currency into the economy. They're supposed to loan it to the U.S. government, and then the government gives it out via, legislative acts that, people vote for the people that go in and sign the bills or don't pass the bills, and that's how the money gets spent. However, in recent years, which by the way, the Fed's never been audited, first of all. So there's that. Never. It's been around since 1913. Second of all, I think this was in 2020, they were spinning up special purpose vehicles that the Fed was funding. Which is the same thing, right? Like you printed money and then you spun up a business and you funded it. Okay, they didn't inject the money into the economy directly, right? They didn't helicopter the money directly. They actually went through the U.S. Treasury channel for that. But they are funding businesses that interact with other businesses in the real economy with freshly printed money. So that also is untrue. Although it's kind of like a legal loophole. So he's correct in the sense that the Federal Reserve Act prohibits that, but he's incorrect in the fact that they sort of circumvented that, the Federal Reserve Act.
Interesting. I didn't know any of that.
But they can't give money out. How do we have money? And the answer is they loan money out. They loan money out. Central banks...
He's also, by the way, like gold there's been money way longer than there's been a central bank. And so his entire discussion up until this point just presupposes the existence of the central bank and that it is the god of money, basically, right? Like until we had the central bank, then we never had money. It's like there's been money everywhere there's ever been trade. It's just the most tradable asset in any trade network.
Yeah.
So his whole framework is just has bad presuppositions.
Only ever make loans. So they create money. They make loans to commercial banks, Lloyd's Bank, NatWest, other banks are available. And then those banks themselves make loans. So the money gets loaned out. But what that means is quite interesting, which means that all money originates as a loan.
What is gold? Does gold originate as a loan, Gary?
Good old Gary.
No, you won't talk about gold, will you, Gary? Because it blows apart everything you're saying.
Now, since if you borrow money, you also have a debt with it. That means that whenever there is money, there is also debt. That means that if I add up the total amount of money and the total amount of debt in the economy, it will always add up to zero.
Wrong. Well, we've already explained this, basically. But no, the total, again, gold is an asset. It's a monetary asset that's 100% equity in the hands of its possessor. There's no associated liability. If you had an economy where everyone just held their own gold, you could have an economy with money and no liabilities.
Right.
He's saying all money equals all liabilities, which means he's thinking within the paradigm of the central bank. Because the central bank counterfeits currency or loans currency, to use a nicer term, into existence. So his depth of thinking is not deep enough.
Now, this is a fundamental truism of our money system as it exists in this country, in Europe, in the US, in Australia, and most of the rich world. The total amount of money, including the total amount of debt, is always zero. Is always zero. And that is important to understand. Because if we know that, then we also know that if one group of people go into a massive amount of debt, for example, mortgage holders or the government, somebody else must be accumulating money or credit. That is really important to understand because it was that fundamental understanding that enabled me at the beginning of COVID to know that, okay, well, if the government is going to accumulate 250 billion, 450 billion of debt, somebody's going to accumulate money elsewhere in the system because we know that these two sides always balance up. It's basically an accounting equation. Okay, so this is the fundamental truism of monetary systems as they are at the moment, that they always add up to zero. That's the way that they're designed. And that is because money is always created by a loan. And if the only way to create money is to create debt, then these two things are always aligned. They're always...
Again, central banking paradigm, you could say he's correct if we just limit it inside the central banking paradigm because the government is issuing, in the U.S. Treasury, so government issues bond, sells bond to the Fed, the central bank of the United States, who issues USD, and there is a loan transaction occurring. So all the currency supply matches the debt of the U.S. government.
Makes sense.
However, it does not, again, you're only talking about currency here. You haven't even got to base money, which is gold.
Balanced. So we know with 100% certainty that the amount of money plus the amount of credit is equal to the amount of debt. Now, I've separated out there money and credit. When I say credit, it means money you are owed. And I think for simplicity, it's probably best to say that anything you have other than cash in your pocket is credit. The money you have in the bank is money owed to you, for example. And really, it probably makes it easier to understand the monetary system if you just assume that everything is credit. It's just a balanced system of who owes money to who. Who owes money to who. There's always a balanced amount of credit and a balanced amount of debt. Fundamentally, whenever there is money, there is somebody who owes that money. And whenever there is debt, there is somebody that money is owed to. It has to balance.
This makes sense why he doesn't understand Bitcoin. He doesn't understand gold. You don't understand gold, you can't understand
I've never
Bitcoin.
heard him talk about gold.
Yeah.
But like I said, I haven't listened to this guy much.
Right.
He hit my radar from his Bitcoin interview.
Yeah. Well, it's starting to make sense.
Now, this is a little bit counterintuitive, and the reason is because people don't think about money like that. You know, if you have £10,000 cash, you know, cash in your pocket or cash in your bank, you don't think somebody else has £10,000 in debt. You know, you as an individual can have £10,000 of cash without any debt. But it is not possible for society to have £10,000 of cash without debt, because the way that the monetary system is designed is that money is only ever created by the creation of debt. So they are always balanced, and on a societal aggregate level, they're always balanced. Now, then that raises an interesting question of, well, if the total amount of money in society is always zero, does that mean the total amount of money in society is constant? What about things like QE? What about things like the central bank cutting interest rates? You know, we hear that the central bank can change the amount of money in the system. And that is because what the central bank can do is make more loans. So they can lend a lot of money into the system. So imagine I'm the central bank and you are the economy. And I lend you £1,000. You've got £1,000 of cash and you have £1,000 of debt. You're balanced. But then what I can do as the central bank is I can lend you another £10,000. Now you've got £11,000 of cash and £11,000 of debt. You're still balanced, but there's more loans floating around. And once you think about money creation like that, you realize that, in a sense, anybody can do that. If you remember the example that we had at the beginning of this discussion, I said, well, if I have £1,000, you have nothing, and then I lend you £1,000, in a way, we've both got £1,000. Do you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And this is worth sitting and thinking about, because this...
Sorry, he's being ambiguous here. He said anybody can do that. Sure, anyone can extend a loan to anyone else, which is just make a promise to pay something in the future, right? I can do it right now. Hey, I'm not actually going to promise you this, but for hypothetical sake, I promise to pay you $1,000 tomorrow, right?
Yep.
We now have a credit debt relationship, okay? That is correct. Anyone can do that. It's a promise. Mm-hmm. What anyone can't do, though, is counterfeit, legally authorized, legal tender that it's backed by the force of law.
Yep.
To create that creditor-debtor relationship. That is reserved exclusively for the central bank. And if you don't believe me, just try to get into the currency counterfeiting business and see what happens to you.
Won't end well.
Will not end well.
I think this is what a lobotomy might feel like. I'm not quite sure. But
we'll see where he goes, but like he's very imprecise so far.
Explains to us the two different understandings of what is money. One of them says that whenever a new loan is created, both people have the money. And that means whenever there is lending, money is being created. And one of them says, no, you have to include all of the debt and all of the credit. And in that sense, the system is always zero. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, this is not super simple, but it's important to understand. And the difference between those two ways of understanding money are at the center of so much argument of people on the internet. And it's basically, some people say that, it's some people thinking in the sense of, you have to include all the debt in the system. And some people saying, you have to include both sides. So if I lend you money, we both have the money. Now, if you, and this is the way that most economists think about money. They think, when I lend you money, £1,000, now we've both got £1,000. They think that all money lending creates new money. So if you believe that all lending creates new money, then it is true that commercial banks create money. But they only create money by creating debt. So commercial banks cannot change the fact that the total amount of money always equals the total amount of debt. They cannot change that. And in fact, nobody can change that. That is a part of the design of the system, the monetary system in Western economies, in Britain, in the US.
This is again why it's so useful to think about money in terms of purchasing power rather than nominal units, because then you'll very quickly understand purchasing power being the goods and services that money has the power to purchase, right? Clearly, that's all the goods and services and stuff in the world. The natural resources, I think, is what he used earlier. It's a bit broader than that, right? It's goods, it's consumer goods or capital goods, anything that money can buy, right? Services, et cetera. Clearly, when you create new units of currency or you counterfeit currency, you have not created any more goods or services.
Right.
Obviously, right?
Yeah.
Like we can make all the promises in the world, but unless we're going to build something, then we haven't created anything. We haven't added to the productive output of the world.
Right.
So I think it's very important to think in terms of purchasing power, where like I think he's very hung up on this idea, and a lot of macroeconomic guys are. They're just purely trying to identify and think about money in these nominal terms, like who's creating it and what does the accounting equation say, rather than the actual consequences in the real world, which is you've now just created this accounting illusion that says there's more money in the system, even though the purchasing power hasn't changed at all.
Right.
So it's a divergence of map and territory, basically.
That makes sense.
But because commercial banks can make loans, some people say commercial banks can create money. And it is true that, say you went to Lloyds Bank and you say, I want to borrow £1 million, and they accept your loan, they will simply credit your bank with your account with £1 million. That is true. And you might think, oh, they've created money. But as soon as you try and spend that £1 million, they have to actually pay it out of the money that they have. It's a little bit like if I said to you, I've got £1,000, and I say, I'm going to lend you £1,000, but I'm going to keep it on account for you. And you say, okay, fine, okay. You've got this account, £1,000. And of course, I can just write that account and say, Simran, £1,000. It's on the account. I've just created money. But as soon as you take the money out, I have to give it to you. You see what I'm saying? I haven't actually created any money. All I've said is, if you want the money, you can have it. So...
Yeah, but when that money is spent in that way, the money is saying that's loaned into existence basically, and it's typically spent to another bank account. Right. Often within the same bank, right? If you're a big enough bank. And so these fictitious ledger entries can go on for a really, really long time.
Yes.
And a good way to think about fiat currency is like it's a monetary system, it's a currency system where money never leaves the bank. Right? Because it's not redeemable for gold, basically. So this thing that used to be, it was a promise for money, is now a broken promise for money, and we just circulate it as basically an irredeemable debt.
Irredeemable debt.
Yeah. So it's an oxymoron in a way. We have like debt-based money.
Yeah.
Money is one of the definitions that's useful, is that it's the final extinguisher of debt.
Yeah.
Right. So if I owe you money and I give you a gold coin.
So that's what he's trying to say.
I think so. I mean, if I'm being generous to him, but the conflation comes in not being more precise about these terms. Money, currency, credit. And then also looking at it through the accounting. Accounting is the language of business, right? It's an equation for a reason. There's no such thing as a balance sheet where assets does not equal liabilities plus equity, right? This might as well be the freezing point of water or the speed of light. Like it has to balance, otherwise it's not a balance sheet. And so he's not thinking about it at that level, basically. He's kind of stuck in like macroeconomic speak, and he's imprecise with his terms, and he's not thinking in terms of accounting flows.
That makes sense.
Hopefully that captures the situation here. The only people who can actually create money are the central bank. The only way they inject that into the system is by making loans. That means that within the economy, money always balances perfectly debt. But anyone, including central banks, including individuals, can make loans. And when loans are made, that means essentially many people are accessing the same money. I'm saying, I've got £1,000, but if you want to use it, you can use it. We can both use the same £1,000. But it doesn't take that balance out of the system. Money is always equal to debt. So that raises a question, right? If central banks can only lend money, they can't give money, then who can give money into the economy? And the answer is, really anybody can give money into the economy. If I borrow money from you and then give it away, then I'm in debt, and since you know that debt equals money, if I go into debt, then the rest of the system has positive money. You see what I'm saying? That makes sense. But how the government...
No, we don't.
No.
Borrow enormous amounts of money and give it out. And then what that does is it, in a sense, puts the rest of the system out of balance. it means that the rest of the system is suddenly no longer adding up to zero. So since the beginning of COVID, the government has increased its debt by £700 billion. And since we know that the system as a whole, debt always equals total money, we know that the rest of the individuals in the game have to have £700 billion. They must have £700 billion. So we know that the average UK adult, because there's about 50 million UK adults, must have an extra £14,000 since the beginning of COVID. We know these things with certainty.
Wow. You see where like bad assumptions get you into deeply, deeply erroneous conclusions?
Yeah,
he's thinking
this
now.
is confusing, honestly. I'm like
just
struggling
saying-
to follow what he's fucking saying. He's taking so long to get to the point, and he's like going in circles. And
He's definitely circling the drain a lot too, which is
Yeah.
annoying. That's why I said next point earlier. It's like, move on.
yeah,
But he just made the claim because the UK government has increased its debt load from zero or by a factor of 700 billion or whatever the number was, that because all debt equals all money, that we know the private sector now has $7 billion more in money. It doesn't make any sense.
No.
It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. What you could say is that, okay, UK government issued their treasury, whatever the UST equivalent is,
yeah,
and they borrowed 700 billion currency of freshly counterfeited currency from
Yep.
the ECB, the European Central Bank.
Yep.
And now they're spending that money,
right.
right? They're buying things, passing laws,
Yep.
legislative acts, et cetera, doing whatever the things governments do with money.
Yeah.
Go to war and lie to you and steal from you and all that.
Funding transgender studies in
Funding,
Bangladesh.
exactly.
Yeah.
Funding transgender studies on hippos in Bangladesh. It's
Yeah.
like, stuff like that. Okay, then that currency will then enter the economy because the government spent it. But what is this doing? Again, because you didn't increase goods or
It's
services,
diluting.
you're increasing the prices of goods and
Yeah.
services. The people that feel that pain the most are the ones that receive that new currency last,
Yes.
right? Typically the poor,
Yeah.
people living on fixed income, and others that don't have assets that are benefiting from the price inflation due to the currency counterfeiting.
Yes, the non-property owning class.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that's why central banking via this mechanism transfers wealth from the poor to the rich.
Yeah, and then the property owning class.
And not,
as the-
sorry, not just it does do the rich indirectly in the way you described, like
Yeah.
the property owning class,
Yeah,
because their assets.
assets go up, and then they get to leverage those assets
Yes.
to go buy more assets.
Yes.
Creating a feedback loop and further bifurcating the society.
Yes, but they're still getting victimized in the system, albeit less.
Yeah.
Right. The real the ultimate beneficiary of this is the shareholder of the central bank.
So how does the property owning class get victimized?
Well, the prices of their assets are still going up, so they're enjoying the inflation that's going up, but they're
Right.
not the first ones to receive the money. The
Right.
first ones to receive the money, which is the government that's spending it
get
directly.
to spend, which is like stealing. They have this money that they didn't earn, and they get to then pull goods or services out of the marketplace.
They're spending-
in an unfair
Exactly.
way because they're the recipients of that newly minted currency.
They're spending money, unearned money.
Yeah.
Basically, yes. Which you want to really get into the rabbit hole. All government money is unearned.
Stolen somehow.
Everything the state has is stolen. Everything it says is a lie. That's Nietzsche. Worth thinking about, but beyond the scope of this conversation.
Worth
And it's just a
thinking
question of who
about.
has that money. It's just a question of who has that money. So, and then this sort of brings us onto other questions like what is QE, what does the central bank do? And I think we'll go into them in future videos. But to summarize, at its heart, money is a loan from the central bank. And then that circulates throughout the economy.
Wow.
Some people go into debt, which means other people go into credit. The total amount of debt always equals the total amount of credit. So we know, for example, the average UK adult has, was it £30,000 of mortgage debt?
Okay.
And we did that in the debt.
You see the move he's made too? In the beginning, he was saying total money equals total debt. Now he's in this sly move where he's saying total credit equals total debt. Well, that is a tautology because debt and credit are two sides of the same coin. It's debt if you owe it, it's credit if it's due to you.
Yes.
Of course, total credit always equals total debt. Okay, yeah. Total up equals total down. Yeah, no shit.
Yeah.
Like it's the same thing. But money does not equal credit, right? Again, on the balance sheet, we have cash and cash equivalents. Then we have credit instruments, right? Accounts receivable, notes receivable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they're not the same thing. So he's done this, like, he did this initial conflation, and then he just sort of like slides in like, oh, all money equals credit, and all credit equals debt. And he's just like, it's slippery.
It is. Do you think he's so confused because he's just trying to make sense of Keynesian economics?
I don't know, dude. I mean, this is the first time I've ever seen this guy, but he's just not. You have to be precise with your terminology if you're going to understand this stuff.
Well, and it's dangerous in some sense because he's influencing the thought around a lot of people who are looking to figure out how to stop getting screwed by the system.
Yeah. And he's perpetrating pseudoscientific thinking, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You might as well be telling us that the sun goes around the earth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's wrong. It's definitively wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like, heliocentrism is true.
Mm-hmm.
Earth is not the center of the solar system. We know that now.
Yeah.
But there was a while when a lot of people fought about that and argued about it.
Yeah.
And, it took
Some
a while.
people still do today.
Yeah. But so he's literally, advocating for pseudoscience.
So we know that the average UK adult must have £30,000 of mortgage credit. We know that the government has increased its debt by £14,000 per adult. So we know the average UK adult has increased their credit by £14,000.
So crazy. Do you hear this?
Mm-hmm.
We've increased government debt by £14,000. So every household is now £14,000 richer. They have £14,000 more credit. Are you like the conclusion he's reaching is actually insane because he makes that fundamental, he has an axiomatic mistake.
Yeah.
That he's conflating all money equals all debt. And you lead to utterly illogical outcomes like this.
Hopefully I'm communicating that there are these two different conceptions of money. One of which includes all debt, includes all credit, and always adds up to zero. And one of which is about total amount of loans in the system. They're both important. If there are loads and loads of loans in the system, what will happen is the interest rate will fall. But it's not the same as the government going into debt and giving huge amounts of money out. Basically, the central bank can lend money, and that brings interest rates down. But the government can give money, and that causes cash accumulation amongst individuals. Since the beginning of COVID, the government has increased its debt by 700 billion. We know that cash has accumulated amongst individuals. It's not the same as QE, right? There's two things happening here. QE is another form of central bank lending. It's more loans in the system. I think we'll do that in the next video, QE. This £700 billion is not QE. This is the total amount of government debt accumulated since COVID. It's money that the government has either printed or borrowed and given out. But either way, if I print money and give it to you, you have more money. If I borrow money from you and give it to you, you have more money because money and money owed to you are very similar things.
Did you just say if I borrow money and give it to you?
Yeah, it's like there's a word salad kind of.
I
It's
can't
like kind
believe
of going in circles.
Yeah, this is very shockingly bad.
If I borrow money and give it back to you, you have the money and you have the money owed to you. So, do you think that's clear?
No.
I want people to understand. Money it's a balanced system. It's a balanced point system. We know it. Some people are in debt. Some people are in credit. If you have,
But that's simply not true. You can have an economy with no debt, right? We could all just go be farmers and just trade crops and never owe each other anything.
Yeah.
And we would have assets and we'd have equity in our business and we'd have no debt.
Yeah.
Okay. This guy is like, just use your intuition, anyone.
It seems as if he's trying to make sense of fractional reserve lending and central banking, but he's taking a long time to run in circles.
Yeah, but then he's saying,
I don't even understand what he's saying.
But then he's saying, let's not talk about it until the next video. You're right. He's being descriptive of central banking in a way. But then he's trying to say, let's not talk about central banking and quantitative easing until the next video. It's like, that's all you're describing, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about we talk about what money is in this video, which is the title of the video. Like, what is money? So why don't you just tell me, Gary, what gold is? I'm sure you're not going to talk about it, but let's see.
debt, somebody has credit. If the government is in debt, somebody has credit. And it's a system of who owes money to who. And of course, the people who are in debt constantly need to find ways to get that money from the people who are in credit. Otherwise, they can't pay their debts back. So really, it's a points-based system. It's perfectly balanced throughout society. But the problem is, in many cases, it is a small amount of very wealthy people who are in credit, and it's the government and a large amount of mortgage-holding individuals who are in debt. So it creates an imbalance. And the people who are in debt, such as the government, which means the taxpayer, and families who have mortgages have to constantly find money to pay to the rich. But that's it. Money is a balanced system. comes from the central bank. Commercial banks, they can't create money, but they can create loans. And if you create loans, it, in some senses, seems like more money being made because people have money, even though they have debt against it, have access to money. But crucially, what is most important for this channel and for the message of this channel, that £700 billion is the increase in government debt, which means we know there has been an increase in private holding of money to the extent of £14,000 for every adult in the country, which is increasing.
I mean, he seems,
I think
he's got drug addict vibes, kind of.
I think maybe something's going on here.
He's an interesting individual.
Why is he repeating himself so many times? If this is an educational video, like, aren't you supposed to move the point along, Gary? Like, you've now said that 4 times.
This feels like an extension of fiat, which is making everyone dumber.
Yeah. We've watched enough fiat politicians today. My brain cells are cooked enough, Gary.
Yeah, you doing okay?
Logged in here to learn something.
I was just thinking to myself, like, oh man, Robert, I hope he's all right.
My brain cells are sizzling.
In most cases, that money is sitting in the bank accounts of wealthy individuals, which means your average wealthy individual has accumulated £100,000, £200,000 extra cash since the beginning.
Like, what a slap in the face. How many people lived through COVID? Probably everyone listening to this right now. It's only 5 years ago. And he's saying, all right, okay, every increase in government debt is an increase in the cash holdings of every individual in society. So the United States government printed about $8 trillion. What's 8 trillion divided by 46 million U.S. households? I can't do that math that quick, but it's some large amount of money.
Yeah.
Does everyone feel some large amount of money richer since COVID? Like, when the government printed that money, did it just show up in your bank account? Were you just like, oh, I have all this extra money, thanks. You got a check for $3,500.
Yeah.
Which is, by the way, I think I might know this math actually. It was something like $46,000 per U.S. household was printed. But each household only received a check for $3,000 or $4,000.
Right.
Okay, so where did the other $42,000 go? It went into the hands of politicians and all the cronies.
Yeah.
So it's a heist in broad daylight. This guy's like hand waving over that, saying that, oh, whatever increase there is in government debt, that just magically shows up in the hands of individuals in the private sector. Like, what? What are you talking about? Like, we just lived through that, and that's not true.
Yeah. See,
we can stay out of the theoretical. We can just be like, what are you talking about? That just happened.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Gary is, he's confusing me, honestly. I feel dumber than when we started today, but.
Gary Diseconomics.
Yeah, I can go home and sleep with my head on the Bitcoin standard and recover, dude.
This is not money they've borrowed. It's money they've essentially been given, ultimately from government. And this is how it was very easy to predict at the very beginning of COVID that there would be
money given to them from government. I'm going to say it again. Everything the state says is a lie. Everything it has is stolen. The government has never given anyone anything ever in the history of governments. Governments have stolen from Peter and given to Paul. Mm-hmm. That is the only thing a government can do.
Yeah.
So the fact that he's arrived at this conclusion of government just magically giving everyone something through like this magical accounting entry, we just increased the lever debt and increased everyone's lever money and we're all better off.
Well, and his big message, what I have seen is he's all about tax the rich. So what he wants to do is the government to confiscate, steal more, and then redistribute that.
Yeah. So you are a Marxist. Why don't you just say that, Gary?
Massive increase in asset prices. And I think what's quite interesting is now, so we're filming this in the middle of January. Last week, both the gold price and the stock
hit gold.
But he's not going to talk about it.
A new all-time high. And that's interesting because economists and traders will normally say gold goes up when the economy is weak and stocks go up when the economy is strong. But both of these things have gone up massively. And I predicted this at the beginning of COVID, and in my opinion, the reason for that is the government has given out a huge amount of money. That has ended up being held by rich individuals. It's hundreds of thousands of pounds for every rich individual. They tend to buy assets. You know, they buy all kinds of assets. They'll buy stocks and property and gold. So all asset prices go up. Doesn't matter whether the economy is bad or good, simply because these guys have so much money. The flip side of it is the government is in a huge amount of debt. Partially that's QE funded. We'll do that in the next video. But they have to pay interest to the rich every single month. And for that reason, that is why they're saying we can't afford to do things. And both of these things have consequences. The debt of the government hurts public services and it hurts public sector pay, creates austerity. But the credit of the rich pushes up asset prices and it pushes up other prices too. This relates to the thing we said at the very beginning of this video, which is money is not real resources. So ultimately, money is a token that you use to buy real resources. So if these guys, the rich, have a ton of money now, they're going to buy more stuff, they're going to push the price up, and you, the ordinary person of this country, will get less stuff. So this amount of money, 700 billion, is unbelievably large. From the very beginning of COVID, I've said it will overwhelm basically all other economic effects until it is resolved. It won't be resolved. It doesn't look like it's going to be resolved. So the end result is prices will stay high. They won't come back down. Especially asset prices will continue to rise and living standards will continue to fall. So that's the video.
He's describing symptoms of central banking again without properly attributing the costs, which is central banking.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, well, as a Marxist, that makes sense. Again, central banking comes from Marxist playbook. So defend the central bank and blame the rich. That's what Marxism is.
Yeah. And so the solution that if he was accurate, the solution is we need a hard money standard because that prevents all of this from taking place.
Yeah. I mean, a Bitcoin standard specifically, I think, prevents the existence of the central bank. You just don't need it anymore. You don't need to centralize the custody of gold to scale it as a transactable medium of exchange globally because Bitcoin's non-physical. It's trivial to custody.
Yeah.
Anyone can do it. You know, you can still use custodians, but the operations are much smaller, much more decentralized. Whereas gold, heavy, physical, bulky, you need to centralize the custody, put a currency on top of it to make it transactable.
Yep.
But then that introduces the corruption. How do you trust the custodian problem, right? Which is proven to be an unsolvable problem across human history. Even if you can trust the custodian, you can't trust the government that will intervene with the custodian and either seize that gold or give themselves cheap loans, et cetera.
And with Bitcoin, the only people that can create new Bitcoin are the people that have a fast enough computing ASICs and or enough energy that can amass cheap, renewable, or whatever, enough energy to mine the coins.
Yeah, it's a game of productive output, right? That you have to summon enough capital and operational expenditure being ASICs, operational being electricity, energy. Yeah. And then you can buy these lottery tickets, if you will, which is like casting your guess to what the answer to the mathematical puzzle will be. The puzzle resolves every 10 minutes and then the Bitcoin is awarded. So it's a capitalistic game. Yes. It drives energy prices lower. Yep. Energy is the number one input to every economic activity in the world. So it actually increases aggregate wealth by incentivizing the decline of energy prices. Yes. And it also, Bitcoin incentivizes an increase in productivity by virtue of it being very hard to steal and impossible to inflate. Therefore, it's less profitable for people to spend their time trying to steal from you or engage in central banking or currency counterfeiting, any of these activities, because they don't work on a Bitcoin standard. So all those people that would be trying to acquire wealth through coercive or deceptive means are now forced to get their ass to work and go do something that consumers want, right? Solve problems for consumers better, faster, cheaper, just like all other free market entrepreneurs.
Oh my gosh, it's such a big deal.
It's such a big deal.
It's like the biggest deal ever.
I think, it's
one of them. I don't know.
I think it's a crazy major innovation. But again, like, come on, dude. Stop talking like you understand what you're talking about. You're misleading so many people. Just say you're a Marxist. Just say, look, I believe in Marxism. I believe in tax the rich. I believe in central banking. Just tell the truth, and then we know what you're all about. And you're not gonna, but I guess that defeats the purpose. Yeah. Because when you're a Marxist, you want people to be confused and in the fold and buying into from each according to their ability to each according to their need. Like you need all of this confusion to perpetrate the ideological scam that you are selling people.
It's a bunch of noise.
What is money? A little bit complicated, but it's something that's important for people to understand if they want to understand what is happening with the economy. We're going to do more explanatory videos, but the key message here is the government has gone enormously into debt. That means somebody has increased their money holding. My analysis says it's overwhelmingly the rich. That increases inequality. That increases asset prices and price in the shops, and it decreases living standards for ordinary people. Okay, so there's one point I want to add on money, which I think is very important for people to understand, which is, I think, one common incorrect way that people conceptualize money is they think of it as if it is a finite resource. So imagine I had like a pile of firewood, okay? And then I burn the firewood bit by bit over the course of a month, and then there's no firewood left, and then there's no fire. We need to go get some more firewood. People think about money as if it's like that, because from the perspective of an individual, it kind of is like that. If you spend all your money, then money runs out. And then, for example, during COVID, the government spent a lot of money. So then there's this kind of perception that, well, the government spent a load of money, we've run out of firewood, we all need to be poor now. There's nothing we can do. But money always is up to zero. Always is up to zero. Money, from the perspective of society, cannot run out. It can only pass from person to person. It can only be held. So if the government has accumulated a huge amount of debt, all that means is some other group of society has gotten rich. And it doesn't mean that we as a society have lost our resources. It's very, very important to understand that money is not real resources. Money is, I think I described it in another video, as a competitive resource or a distributional resource. Money is only used to determine who gets the real resources. And if you have lost a load of money, that can only be because somebody else has got a load of money, because we know with guaranteed certainty the total amount adds up to zero. And I think this idea that money...
Okay. So I need to, let's hear him say that one more time.
Somebody else has got a load of money, because we know with guaranteed certainty the total amount adds up to zero.
Well, I couldn't get it to go
And I
back
think this
15 seconds.
idea that money...
Here, let's go.
Maybe you can do it for me. There we go.
Video as a competitive resource or a distributional resource. Money is only used to determine who gets the real resources. And if you have lost a load of money, that can only be because somebody else has got a load of money, because we know with...
If you have lost money, that can only be because someone else has received money. Is that what he just said?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
Okay, by his own definition, money equals debt.
Mm-hmm.
That's the axiom this whole video is about, which is wrong. Okay, you can take debt to zero, right? We don't have to have promises owed, but it doesn't have to exist. You could be a subsistence farmer. I could be a subsistence farmer. We could all be subsistent farm, which means you farm your own shit and you don't trade with anyone. The whole economy could be subsistence farmers. In that economy, according to his definition, there would be zero debt, zero promises between people,
Right.
and therefore zero money.
Yeah.
Okay, so you could also have promises between people and then money. But if those promises go away, right? If those debts are paid, then the money goes away, according to him.
Which
But
is
he just
true.
said the only way you can lose, how did it say it again? If you lose money, that means someone else has gained money. Well, that's not true. We just said you could wipe out all the money and the entire economy and no one would have lost any money.
Right.
Debts would have been settled. So it doesn't make any sense.
No. That's how I feel about the whole thing.
Yeah. But I mean, he is like, even in his own imprecise terminology and little limited worldview, he's contradicting himself at this point.
Yeah.
Oh, Gary, diseconomics, man.
Diseconomics.
certainty the total amount adds up to zero. And I think this idea
God,
that
this guy
money,
is such a
we've
joke.
run out of money, I mean, it's really powerful in politics. You know, the big thing is after 2010, when the Labour government was voted out and the Conservative government was voted in, there's this, we've run out of money, there's no more money. There's no more money. And it's totally impossible. And because money is only a distributional resource, we know that if a problem can be fixed by distribution of money, we know that that problem can only be a distributional problem. You cannot
comes
fix
the
a
Marxism.
lack of resources with money. It's not possible. Because money is not resources, and money cannot create resources. If you don't have enough energy, you need to go and get some more energy. You know, you need to get some more coal or some more wind power or some more firewood, whatever you're using for energy. You can't make it out of money. But I think it's been used powerfully against the Labour Party. They've said, they spent all the money. But it's actually quite powerful to understand that money can never run out. Resources can run out. And, there may be instances, for example, this year just gone, we've seen there's been less energy and the energy price has gone up. Resources can run out, but money can never run out. The government can never run out of money. If the government has run out of money, somebody has that money. If the government has gone into debt, somebody has.
The government can never run out of money. It just doesn't, you're not understanding that government is a business. Yes, it can run out of money, just like a business can run out of money, or an individual can run out of money and they can go bankrupt.
Yeah.
Right. Or they could have some money, but they have liabilities that exceed the amount of their assets and they can be insolvent and they can still go bankrupt.
Yes.
Right. He's still speaking as if government is God. To say government cannot run out of money. Are you kidding me?
The whole thing is tough.
Very tough.
Really important to understand money. You as an individual can run out of money, but society can never run out of money. And if the government has gone into debt, it is because somebody has accumulated money. So it's always in balance.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
man.
Dude, so bad. But it's just these Marxists, man. These Marxists have a really hard time. This is why Mises is so important. Looking at the world through the lens of methodological individualism, that we are individual humans that act. We're not these economic aggregates like society or the rich or the poor. Where do you even draw the line? What's rich to you? What's poor to you? It's just it's utter nonsense. But then when they get people thinking in these aggregates, you're in la la land already. Then you can just start making this weird stuff up, like all debt equals all money and it always balances to zero. It's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Then you come to these illogical conclusions like, every time we increase government debt, that means there's money in someone's pocket. It's like, what are you talking about? That just literally pandemic just happened.
Yeah.
$8 trillion increase in the money supply in the US. Where did that end up? Right? Like if he's saying that it ends up in people's, it is debt monetization and that the central bank is counterfeiting the currency and people are spending it, but it's not ending up pro rata in everyone's account, right? It's being distributed to bureaucrats and they're spending it. And then everyone that's far away from receiving that money suffers from inflation. So anyways,
So what's your favorite? You've had asked so many people this question. You've thought about it a long time. What's your favorite answer to the question, what is money?
It's all contextual ultimately, but I mean, I think purchasing power, like we talked about in this video, is just the most useful way to think about it, because then you can get behind the illusion, right? Instead of thinking about, wait, where does money come from? Well, if they print money, then where does that money go? It's like, well, okay, they printed money. Do you know what that means, right? So the money, there's a pool of money. There's $100 in the economy. And so let's say there's 100 trees, right? And that's the whole economy, okay?
Yeah.
Each tree costs $1.
Right.
And then yet there's this institution that will just double the money supply, right? To $200.
Yeah.
But it doesn't just get allocated to everyone equally. Like I seem like he was suggesting, I could be wrong about that. Now that he's tilting it towards the rich, maybe.
Yeah.
But when the group that counterfeits the new $100 starts to spend that money, they're buying the trees at $1 initially, right? And then the price is going to rise and rise and rise and rise. And by the time that whole $100 is pumped into the economy, now the price of every tree is $2.
Right.
But the group that printed the money acquired them at $1, $1.01, $1.02, $1.03, $1.04. So what did they do?
They had an unfair advantage.
They stole resources from everyone that was holding dollars when the price of trees were $1 each.
Right.
That is the game. That is central banking in a nutshell. Or as Thomas Massey does it, he just gets a glass of beer. He's like, this is your buying power or your purchasing power.
Yeah.
This is inflation. And he pours a cup of water into it and it dilutes it, right? It's the principle of dilution.
Yeah.
Very obvious. We all know it, whether we know it or not.
Yep.
Garyseconomics doesn't understand it.
Garyseconomics. All right. Well, thank you for walking us through that one.
Yeah, that was painful.
Painful, but I don't know. Somebody's got to debunk this garbage.
Yeah. Well, we have to defeat the Marxists. And again, this is the guy, man. Mises, you want to understand money? And by the way, I will show this one chart. It is quite confusing And this is in Safeteen's book, Principle of Economics. But he has a nice chart that shows all the different types of money, money in the broad sense, money in the narrow sense. And there is some subtlety to it and nuance. But all money equals all debt is just fundamentally wrong.
Yeah. Well, like I've said a couple times today, we need some Mind Lab Pro.
What is moneypodcast.com, where we talk about the reality of money, hopefully to the best of our ability. We are not Marxist. We are freedom maximalist. You can find me on X, Breedlove22, or Instagram, Breedlove_22.
And I'm Eric V. Stacks on X and Instagram. I want to call it Twitter until Elon becomes pro-Bitcoin. So
yeah, Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter.
It's Twitter, Elon.
Like, subscribe, leave a comment. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, and come see us in Miami, Gary.
Yeah. Oh my God. Imagine this guy in the room, dude. We're going to end it on that.
iCoin Technology has released a slick new hardware wallet. It looks like a mini iPhone with a high-res 3-inch touchscreen and camera on it. The device has no Wi-Fi, no cellular connection, and no GPS. It is an air-gapped hardware wallet which uses QR codes and a camera to communicate with the Bitcoin network. It has a built-in camera which is required for air-gap operation, and it has an optional Bluetooth compatibility. It's really a brand new user interface and user experience for a Bitcoin hardware wallet. iCoin makes self-custody accessible, easy to use, and non-intimidating. It even comes with an optional custom iCoin thermal printer, so you can print out the private key and its associated QR code when you're setting up the wallet. This makes setup quick and simple. Also, it is easy to restore the wallet just by reading the seed phrase QR code with the wallet camera. And as we always talk about on this show, the only way you can truly own your Bitcoin is by having it in self-custody. So you need a device like the iCoin wallet to truly own your Bitcoin. So go to iCointechnology.com/breedlove today for 30% off the purchase of this sleek new hardware wallet. Again, that's iCointechnology.com/breedlove. If you're anything like me, you understand that Bitcoin is something we can use every day to connect, to collaborate, and to build stronger, freer communities. As true Bitcoiners, you all know we are each responsible for onboarding more Bitcoiners. That's why I chose to partner with Cowbolt, an expense splitting app that settles in Bitcoin. It can be as simple as splitting a dinner bill. Your friend covers dinner and you reimburse them, but you send it back to him in Bitcoin. Now your friend has their first sats. And as I always say, where your money goes, the mind follows. By using Cowbolt to get Bitcoin into the hands of your friends and family, you can help us orange pill the world. Cowbolt is built to let you split costs, share expenses, and settle instantly, while always keeping full control of your keys. Cowbolt is simple, social, non-custodial, exactly how Bitcoin was meant to be used. If you're serious about Bitcoin, it's time to act like it. Download Cowbolt today on iOS or Android. To learn more, go to cowbolt.com. Again, that's Cowbolt, COWBOLT.com. Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE. Would you rather have 1 Bitcoin today or 2 Bitcoin a few years from now? Bitcoin mining is a tried and true strategy for accumulating Bitcoin. Over a 2 to 4 year time frame, successful miners have consistently accumulated more Bitcoin than they otherwise would with a traditional dollar cost average strategy. Blockware mining as a service enables you to start mining Bitcoin from your laptop. Blockware handles everything from securing the miners to sourcing low-cost power to configuring the mining pool. They do it all. Plus, with Blockware's one-of-a-kind mining marketplace, you can buy and sell live Bitcoin miners with just a few keystrokes. In this marketplace, buyers get to purchase live machines at vetted facilities, enabling them to mine with zero lead time. And sellers get the opportunity to liquidate their machines and hosting contracts at will. This means you can mine Bitcoin with zero long-term commitment and high liquidity on your mining rigs. Blockware will even cover your energy bill for 1 week per mining rig when you sign up at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. Again, that's 1 free week of Bitcoin mining at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. And on top of this offer, you can also use code Breedlove to get $100 off your first mining rig with Blockware Solutions. Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the Wolf Startup Accelerator could be for you. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to wolfnyc.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's Wolf, WOLFNYC.com. Bitcoin custody is evolving. Both self-custody and single third-party custody come with significant risk and trade-offs. OnRamp is pioneering a new standard, multi-institution custody, which eliminates single points of failure, adding fault tolerance and redundancy to your setup. OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a segregated cold storage multi-key vault guarded by 3 independent institutional-grade custodians, none of which have unilateral control over your keys. Your funds are fully auditable on-chain, cannot be rehypothecated, and can only move or be withdrawn at your explicit direction. Multi-institution custody removes the technical, mental, and physical burdens of private key management, providing unparalleled peace of mind for you and your loved ones. Bitcoin is money, and as the price continues to appreciate, OnRamp helps you seamlessly tap into financial services like trading, inheritance, insurance, loans, IRAs, and more, all without compromising on security or accessibility. Schedule a consultation with the OnRamp team to learn more at onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. Again, that's onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is MindLab Pro. MindLab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take MindLab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world, my thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is radically improved. MindLab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. MindLab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from over 1,400 human trials conducted over the past 32 years. So if you're looking to enhance your brain power, MindLab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove. Knowing when to buy Bitcoin can feel complicated, and knowing how much to buy can be overwhelming, and getting started can be a headache, but it doesn't have to be. That's exactly why I recommend Coinbits, because it solves these major blockers and it's the easiest way to buy Bitcoin. With Coinbits' Round Ups feature, you can automatically convert your spare change into Bitcoin while you shop. For example, when you buy a coffee for $3.50, the extra 50 cents is rounded up and it goes straight into Bitcoin. Here's why that's a huge win for you, because you don't have to be a tech wizard or try to time the market just right with Bitcoin. With Coinbits Roundups, you simply set it, shop, and stack sats. And you can set this up in under 2 minutes. Just visit the website, connect your card, and boom, you're buying a little Bitcoin every time you spend money. So stop wasting your time with complicated exchanges or confusing shitcoin apps. Coinbits simplifies your Bitcoin savings strategy. So go to coinbits.app/breedlove. Again, that's coinbits.app/breedlove. So there's a very special place called the Farm at Okefenokee. It's a 1,000-acre regenerative farm community about 45 minutes northwest of Jacksonville, Florida. The farm is a completely off-grid community. It has total food, water, and energy independence. Everything on the farm is 100% organic, and it even features wild boar and bear hunting. The farm at Okefenokee is right next to the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, where you can do camping and canoeing tours. So if you're like me and you're interested in the self-sovereign lifestyle, then you can get your own lot on the farm at Okefenokee if you tell them that I sent you. Once you get a lot, you can build one of 3 custom cabin options. So if you value freedom, self-sovereignty, and living in touch with nature, then join me and my family. We have lot number 21, and we're going to be building a cabin there starting December 2025. To learn more about the farm at Okefenokee, go to okefarm.com and make sure to tell them that I sent you. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.